stories beyond imagination.
There are stories that live in shadows, hidden in files stamped classified, where the truth feels stranger than any fiction. One of these stories begins with a man named Ingo Swann, an artist, a thinker, and above all, a psychic. The world knew him as eccentric, but the CIA saw something more. In the early 1970s, as the Cold War reached its most paranoid heights, whispers inside intelligence circles spoke of an experiment that defied logic. Remote viewing, the ability to see across time and space with the mind alone. To skeptics, it was nonsense. To believers, it was the next frontier of espionage. And in this strange arena, Ingo Swann stood as a pioneer. What he claimed to witness would push the boundaries of human imagination and spark one of the most unsettling mysteries of modern history, the existence of alien bases on the far side of the moon. If true, it meant humanity was no longer alone, and worse, our neighbors were watching. The project was called Stargate. Buried in layers of secrecy, it recruited individuals believed to have psychic potential. These viewers were tasked with impossible missions, sketching Soviet submarines hidden beneath oceans, describing weapons locked away in secure facilities, even locating missing persons. At first, the results were inconsistent, but occasionally, the data matched reality with chilling precision. That was enough for the CIA to continue. Swann became one of their most notable recruits. Quiet, thoughtful, and oddly fearless, he claimed to see things no one else could. But the day he was asked to look at the moon, everything changed. Unlike earthly targets, the moon carried weight, the unknown, the untouchable, the silent satellite that had inspired myths for millennia. Yet the government wanted to know if it was truly empty. Swann, sitting in a controlled room with nothing but pen and paper, closed his eyes. And when he opened them again, he described something no scientist or astronaut had ever dared to imagine. Swann's pencil moved across the page quickly, as though his hand no longer belonged to him. He spoke softly as he drew. Structures, metallic, rising like towers, and domes glowing faintly. His handlers exchanged nervous glances. The moon's far side was never visible from Earth. And in the 1970s, our imaging technology was limited. But what he described was not craters or dust. It was architecture. He mentioned terraces cut into cliffs resembling industrial platforms. Pipes and vents seemed to stretch out from hidden caverns, releasing faint trails of vapor into the airless void. Swann insisted these were not natural formations. The base, he claimed, was active. Then he paused, shivered, and added something that made his audience lean in closer. I think they see me. At that moment, the experiment became more than observation. It turned into contact. What did he mean, they see me? Remote viewers were supposed to be invisible observers, minds drifting across time and space without consequence. Yet Swann described a chilling sensation. Beings, not human, turning toward him as if aware of his psychic intrusion. He struggled to put their appearance into words, sketching angular forms, elongated limbs, and heads that seemed too large, their skin pale under the moon's harsh light. They were not idle. They worked in teams, constructing, assembling, and moving with precision. Their presence was industrial, not ceremonial. These were not gods nor wandering travelers. They were engineers. And the moment they became aware of Swann, a pressure built in his skull. He likened it to being pushed out, as though a silent force warned him, "You do not belong here." The handlers listened in silence, uncertain whether they had uncovered madness or a secret not meant to be touched. Decades later, in 2006, when the CIA began releasing files on the Stargate Project, Swann's participation was confirmed. His sessions were written, cataloged, and archived. Buried in the notes were sketches of towers, domes, and strange machinery on the moon. Skeptics dismissed them as imagination, but others could not ignore the overlap, with later satellite images showing unexplained anomalies. Could Swann have seen something real? If so, what were these beings building, and why hide on the moon's far side? For Swann, the answer was terrifyingly simple. They were already here, working quietly, preparing. He repeated often that these aliens were not friendly, not neutral. Their purpose remained hidden, but their indifference to humanity's survival was clear. And if they noticed one psychic peering into their domain, how long before they noticed the rest of us? Inside the intelligence community, Swann's claims sparked quiet arguments. Some analysts dismissed him outright, saying he was weaving dreams into sketches. Others whispered about the accuracy of his previous sessions, describing Soviet facilities he could not possibly have known about, locating submarines in classified locations. Could this moon vision also be true? Skeptics raised eyebrows, but they couldn't erase the unease. If there was even a chance the moon wasn't empty, it would change everything. Yet official channels demanded silence. Reports were classified, locked away in archives that only a handful of officials could access. To acknowledge Swann publicly would risk ridicule and political fallout. Still, the story spread in fragments. Within quiet rooms of Langley and Fort Meade, the question lingered like smoke. What if Swann really saw something? And if he did, what else might be watching? For centuries, the far side of the moon has been humanity's blind spot, always turned away from Earth. It became a canvas for imagination, gods, monsters, or empty rock. Even when Apollo astronauts circled it, their brief observations offered little clarity. What Swann described, however, was specific and unnerving. Metallic spires where no natural mountains should exist. Caverns with artificial symmetry, as though carved by intelligence rather than geology. Platforms that looked like landing docks. His words carried weight because they aligned with something more troubling. Reports from astronauts who hinted at strange radio interference, fleeting shadows, and unexplained signals when they passed over the far side. Though these accounts were often buried or denied, Swann's visions revived them. If alien bases did exist, then the far side was the perfect location, hidden forever from human eyes, save for the rare visitor or the psychic gaze of a man like Swann. Swann would later describe the most disturbing part of his session. Not the structures, but the feeling of being noticed. It wasn't simply that the beings were aware of him. It was that they were displeased. He felt watched, probed, and pushed back. His descriptions used words like cold, indifferent, and strategic. These were not invaders, seeking conversation. They were workers, builders, and whatever they were constructing, it was purposeful. In that moment, Swann claimed, he realized something profound. Humanity was not the dominant intelligence in near-Earth space. We were children peeking through a keyhole into a factory that was never meant for us. That realization haunted him, and in later interviews, he admitted that it left a scar on his mind, proof not only of their presence, but of their refusal to share their intent. When Stargate documents surfaced decades later, researchers combed through the material with fascination. Among mundane reports were transcripts of Swann's sessions. His sketches showed structures rising from crater floors, beams of light piercing the darkness, and shadowy forms he struggled to capture in human language. Some dismissed them as artistic imagination, but others noticed strange coincidences, similarities between his descriptions and unexplained anomalies captured in later lunar missions. Photographs revealed unusual shapes, geometric ridges, and unnatural patterns. NASA called them tricks of light or camera artifacts, but conspiracy theorists were less forgiving. To them, Swann had provided an early glimpse of a truth long denied. His notes, buried in the Stargate files, became a kind of forbidden gospel for those who believed humanity was not alone on the moon. Swann never softened his stance. When asked if aliens existed, he replied without hesitation, "Not only do they exist, they are here already, building something on the moon." But his warning was sharper. They are not friendly. He did not describe an invasion in flames and battleships. He described something colder, indifference. To them, humanity was not a threat, nor an ally. We were irrelevant. That, he argued, was far more dangerous. If we stumbled into their plans, we would be swept aside like ants crossing a construction site. This was his greatest fear, that the world, too busy with politics and power struggles, would fail to notice until it was far too late. And in the silence of the archives, his words echoed, a psychic's warning, a spy's secret, and perhaps a glimpse into the next chapter of human history. Long before Swann's revelations, whispers circulated among Apollo astronauts. While official transcripts described their awe at the lunar landscape, Conspiracy theorists claimed that off-record transmissions told a different story. Strange radio interference plagued missions, especially on the far side. Some astronauts privately admitted seeing flashes of light or fleeting shadows that should not exist in the vacuum. Buzz Aldrin once hinted at a strange object that followed Apollo 11, though NASA brushed it aside as space debris. These stories aligned uneasily with Swann's sketches. He had no access to astronaut accounts, yet his descriptions overlapped with the whispers. It was as if his visions confirmed what the brave explorers had only dared to hint, that the moon was not silent but occupied. Swann often referred to the bases as factories. They were not shrines or monuments, but industrial complexes. He described corridors cut into rock, lights that flickered with mechanical rhythm, and machines moving with an eerie precision. He believed the moon was being mined, harvested for resources, and prepared for something larger. "It is not for us," he told a researcher years later. "It is theirs." What disturbed him most was the scale, the sense of a vast project underway, invisible to human eyes but monumental in its ambition. Factories implied production, production implied purpose. But the nature of that purpose remained locked in the silent geometry of alien architecture. Remote viewing was already a controversial practice, with many participants suffering emotional strain. But Swann's session left deeper marks. He spoke of sleepless nights, of waking in cold sweats with visions of pale figures turning their gaze toward him. He said their indifference was worse than hostility. They did not fear us nor even acknowledge us as equals. That cosmic irrelevance weighed heavily on him. To imagine humanity dwarfed not just in size but in importance left him shaken. He often painted abstract works after his sessions, swirls of cold colors and jagged forms that seemed to echo the alien landscapes he described. To his friends, these paintings were cryptic art. To Swann, they were therapy, attempts to purge images that refused to leave. Why did the CIA bury Swann's revelations? Public knowledge of alien presence would have upended geopolitics, religion, and science. The Stargate Project itself was already controversial. Psychic warfare sat on the edge of ridicule. To admit their star viewer saw alien bases would have destroyed credibility, so the files were locked away. Analysts wrote their reports, sealed them in cabinets, and moved on. Yet secrecy has a way of fermenting belief. The very act of hiding information created legends. Researchers who uncovered fragments of Stargate later viewed the omissions as confirmation. If there was nothing to hide, why hide it? Swann's story became myth, half suppressed, half whispered, and all the more powerful because of it. The far side of the moon is more than a blind spot. It is silence itself. Radio signals from Earth cannot penetrate its bulk, making it the perfect location for secrecy. That silence, Swann believed, was deliberate. The bases thrived in isolation, shielded from both human eyes and human ears. When satellites finally mapped the far side in detail, strange anomalies appeared, domes, ridges, structures too symmetrical to be chance. NASA dismissed them as tricks of light. Yet enthusiasts compared them to Swann's sketches. The silence became louder. It was as though the moon itself conspired to keep its secrets, and humanity, desperate for certainty, was left with nothing but shadows. Critics scoffed at Swann's claims. Remote viewing, they argued, had never been scientifically proven. Any successes were coincidences, products of vague language and selective memory. Yet believers countered with Swann's track record. He had described secret Soviet facilities years before satellites confirmed their existence. He had located military hardware hidden deep within foreign soil. Could imagination alone account for such precision? The debate raged, unresolved. But one thing was undeniable. Swann never changed his story. Until his death, he maintained that alien presences were real, their bases hidden on the far side of the moon, and their motives unknown. In a world where certainty is rare, his unwavering conviction was unsettling in itself. In his later writings, Swann expanded on the beings he encountered. He called them builders, not invaders. They worked methodically, as if guided by plans older than humanity itself. Their technology was advanced, yet their movements were practical, industrial. They were not gods demanding worship, nor soldiers preparing for war. They were workers completing tasks too vast for human comprehension. This vision clashed with popular depictions of aliens as conquerors or saviors. To Swann, the truth was stranger. They were indifferent engineers, shaping a cosmic project in which humanity played no role. And perhaps that was the greatest threat, to be ignored entirely. Researchers obsessed with Swann's story began searching lunar photographs for evidence. They highlighted hexagonal craters, linear ridges, and anomalies resembling towers. Most scientists dismissed these as pareidolia, the human tendency to find patterns in chaos. But to believers, the overlap with Swann's visions was uncanny. How could a psychic in the 1970s describe structures that resembled anomalies captured? Decades later, some even suggested that governments edited or blurred lunar photos before releasing them to the public. The moon, once a symbol of romance and poetry, became for them a stage of hidden industry, a workshop cloaked in darkness. What terrified Swann most was not aggression, but apathy. Humanity has always feared invasion, conquest, or extermination. But indifference is worse. The builders did not acknowledge us as rivals or even pests. We were beneath notice, like insects crawling near a construction site. If our paths crossed, we would simply be removed without malice or hesitation. This realization shook Swann's worldview. To him, it was not a question of if they come, but whether we would ever even notice their work until it was complete. The nightmare was not destruction, but irrelevance, a future where humanity's story mattered, no more than dust drifting across the void. Swann described the moon as a staging ground, a construction site for something larger. Perhaps it was mining, extracting helium-3 or other resources. Perhaps it was building machines that would never touch Earth, but serve purposes beyond our solar system. He admitted he could not know. All he sensed was scale, immense, patient, and unstoppable. Factories hummed in silence, overseen by entities that neither feared nor welcomed humanity. It was as though Earth's closest neighbor was being repurposed, transformed into a hub for a project beyond human imagination. If true, then every night we look at the moon, we are staring at an alien factory floor hidden just beyond sight. Some theorists connected Swann's visions with ancient myths. Cultures across the world spoke of the moon as home to gods, watchers, or hidden beings. Were these stories fragments of truth, distorted by time? If alien presences had always been there, perhaps ancient seers glimpsed them too. Swann's story fit neatly into these legends, reawakening them with a modern scientific twist. To skeptics, this was mere coincidence, the human tendency to weave narratives from chaos. But to believers, it was continuity, proof that humanity had always known, in whispers and dreams, that the moon was never empty. By the 1990s, the Stargate Project lost funding. Official reports claimed the results were inconclusive, the data unreliable. Psychic espionage was abandoned, or so the public was told. Files were buried in archives, declassified decades later. Yet insiders whispered that remote viewing never truly stopped, only shifted into deeper secrecy. If true, then Swann's moon visions may not have been the last. Others may have been sent, quietly, to peer into the void and report what they saw. But those results, if they exist, remain unseen. Officially, Stargate ended. Unofficially, its shadows linger. Swann never wavered. In interviews, books, and lectures, he repeated his claim: aliens exist, they are already here, and they are building on the moon. He spoke calmly, without hysteria, as though stating a fact. His certainty unsettled both believers and skeptics. Here was a man who had spent his life navigating strange mental landscapes, and he insisted that one vision stood above the rest. For him, the moon was not just a barren satellite. It was occupied. His testimony became both a warning and a puzzle, left behind for future generations to interpret. Today, Swann's story lives in a liminal space, too strange to accept, too detailed to dismiss. For scientists, it remains an anomaly. For ufologists, it is a cornerstone. For storytellers, it is inspiration. The truth may never be known, buried in classified files or hidden in the darkness of space. Yet the story refuses to die. Every new lunar mission, every fresh photograph, reignites the debate. Are we alone or are we blind? Swann's visions linger like an itch in humanity's collective mind, daring us to look harder at the face we never see. In the end, the greatest power of Swann's testimony is not proof, but the question it leaves behind. If alien bases do exist on the far side of the moon, what are they building? Are they preparing for expansion, for departure, or for something we cannot comprehend? And if they noticed one man peering into their realm, have they already noticed the rest of us? Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is not that Swann was wrong, but that he was right. And humanity has been living under silent observation for longer than we realize. The moon, glowing gently in the night sky, may not be a symbol of romance or solitude at all. It may be a mask, and behind it something is still building.